Okay.
Okay, it's recording.
Okay, so my first question is how are the characters experienced throughout the book, and do you think many students relate to this in the United States?
I would probably say yes, but not around here. Maybe up in like the north or something. Because I know it's common in the United States because I've heard about it. But
There's there's larger cities like in our state, like Raleigh, Charlotte, that have some refugees that come from this part of Africa, and so I guess in those schools, this would probably be more pertinent than say like out here in like Watauga, Ash, or Wilkes. But I mean, as teachers, there might be a chance we have somebody that is from there or experienced that or knows somebody who did.
I would say it's probably more common like in people who like immigrated here or like weren't born here, because I don't think we have, fortunately that's not a thing in the United States, or at least if it is, like
Yeah.
it's not. But I would say definitely like agreeing with what Dana said about that.
It kind of relates to something that Jessica and I like talked about in our language and culture class. Like we talk about like immigration kind of and stuff like that, and so like it just kind of like made me think back into that class like about their cultures and stuff, and like how like although like there is like kind of like a set culture I guess in like the United States, like there's more than just one, so like it's interesting to see like how their cultures are too.
yeah, my in that same class we have to do a language culture memo and we have to interview somebody, and I'm interviewing one of my friends that immigrated from Mexico to here, so, and he's the only one here out of his family, and it's just it's everywhere.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that this was kind of a situation that wasn't as relatable, but I feel like this certain, work of literature is definitely going to be more applicable as time goes on, especially like when we become teachers. I feel like it's going to be very common, because there are more refugees immigrating here as time goes on. So I definitely think that it might not be as relevant now, but it will be in the future.
Right.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Sounds good.
Okay, and my second question is, do you think the way the book is illustrated helps portray the story in any way?
I think it really helps. Like the first couple pages, you see how it's like sort of that flashback color, like it's all dark colors, brown, white, things like that. And then it goes like into color, and I think it really does a good job. And like when it talks about the soldiers with the red eyes and like the way they were acting, the way they were dressed, it really illustrates out. If the clothes were dirty, you could see the red outline in the eyes, and I think like each part sets the mood for what you're reading.
Yeah, I like how the pictures, it actually, the color, you can see like how maybe their voice look like, because like we don't know what they look like, but it shows color of what like woods look like.
Yeah,
Sorry, Peyton. I think it really brought out like the emotions of like what the little boy, is it Michael? Is that how you pronounce it, or is it Michelle?
I'm not sure. I thought maybe Mitchell.
Okay, yeah. Well, the little boy, like I felt like it really helped like show his emotions and how he was feeling in the moments, like in each of the panels, like as he was going through his experience.
that's kind of like what I was thinking, like when I wrote the question, because like for me, like to read something, like I kind of like to like almost like see myself like in the situation and kind of like live through it. And so I think by like his emotions, like the facial expressions from like the people and like the little boy himself, like I think it really helps like me to like do that. So, yeah.
I definitely agree with you guys are saying about the illustrations, because like I mentioned, one of mine is how do you think that it like the illustrations themselves made the impact of the story stronger on students who may be reading it? Like how do you guys think that they were detailed but not to the point of like scaring young children?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you think that they were powerful enough to like get the point across? or do you think they were kind of more of like an accessory?
Well,
Oh, what was that?
I actually think that they were made, like the way they were made gives out the point across really well. But say if a young child reads this, he or she might feel emotional about it.
Yeah,
So
which I
I think-
definitely think is the point. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're fine. I think it would also help, like, because so many kids in the United States, like, they're probably not experiencing things like this, and they probably don't even know, like, from 3 people over an experience like this.
Yeah.
So I think the pictures would help someone connect. Like, I know it helped me connect because I don't have any personal, like, experiences from this story or this topic. So the pictures kind of, like you said, help me put myself in that place.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
So going off of that, my second question just ties into it because I really like graphic novels and I want to use them in my future classroom setting. So I really like talking about the illustration side of it. How do you guys feel? Do you think this book would have been as powerful if it would have been written in a different format? Do you think that it would have been as powerful for young children, or do you think that being in graphic novel form made it easier for us to connect to it? Because I know especially like when he started talking about, especially on page 35, I think, whenever he's sitting on he's like sitting around all the people and they're talking about their little issues, like, oh, I hate my phone, complaining about this and that. Like, I don't know. I feel like the illustrations made this book powerful for young kids. How do you guys feel about it?
I think like the way it's like laid out, like in like the little squares and stuff, like section by section, I think it really like helps break down the book in a way that like your students are going to be able to understand like how he like went through his like day, like step by step, and like what he was thinking and like what that exact moment was like, because it's like showing a picture for like every little thing that he's talking about, which I liked.
I liked how I really do think this is the best way to get this, for him to get this out to little children, because they would feel more compelled to read it because it's easy and they get to see pictures. Like if it was a chapter book and they just had to read, there was no pictures, there's no way they would get through it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I just kind of wanted to see what you guys thought.
Yeah, I think like for it being a graphic novel, like to be able to see what the author wants you to see, because if you're reading a chapter book, your imagination's going, so it's going to be based off things that you've seen in life or that you've noticed. Like when it talked about Africa, you might would think of like, okay, the savannah, with the grasslands of the trees, or you might have thought of like Egypt with the pyramids, but here like you actually get to see exactly what the author wanted you to see. So I think for kids it really helps, especially how kids now are like, they get a lot more digital technology than like we did when we were kids, just like 10, 15 years ago. And the media that is out there is just so much more for them. So I think being able to visually see it is like a really great aspect for reading, and I think it'll hook them in better.
Oh, yeah.
I'll go next. So reading it said he was 5 years old when he was kidnapped and forced into child slavery. How, we can't relate to that, but how does it make y'all feel that a child his age was forced into war?
It saddened me, like, how normal it was or is in that area. Like, I think that was the biggest takeaway for me. It was like just as likely that your kid wasn't going to come home from school as it was that they would come home from school. And like just imagining that, like as a teacher, like you have kids coming into your classroom, like knowing that there's a chance like they might not come back the next day, and it's not because they're on a vacation or because they're sick, it's because they've been kidnapped. Like just imagining a reality like that was just kind of crazy, like from different perspectives of like a teacher, a future parent, a sibling, like anything. Like that's just, it's really deep.
Going off of that, like it said on page like 13, when like the soldiers are like entered into the book, like talking about how like in the top picture it says like growing up we often saw military vehicles, uniformed soldiers, like seeing how like that's like their daily lives and like thinking about like our daily lives, like we have like nothing like that. And so like it's just weird to think like they like go throughout their day like seeing soldiers and stuff like that. So it's just kind of the norm, and to like see these men like come in and like break the norm up, I guess, was like really shocking, I guess, for me to like see or like read. So I mean it is like heartbreaking to like know that like kids like that like do experience this and they shouldn't have to, but yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
it definitely was really, really hard to, I feel like without the illustrations, even I wouldn't be able to kind of fathom what it would have been like. Because especially the thing that strikes me the most is, like you guys were talking about how normal it was, but how it, you know, I didn't realize that he was only 16 when he was able to finally immigrate over to Canada. Like, because he was so young when he was taken, he had to grow up so fast. And that was one of the biggest things to me, was like seeing this child become an adult overnight. Like, that was one of the biggest things that I couldn't fathom. It's still, I can't, it's so weird for me. I don't even know how to like word it.
My second question is, how did y'all's emotion at all change from the start of the book to the end of the book? Because I know mine did. I didn't realize it was a true story till I read after, when I read the little flap. And once I found that out, I was already so emotional because I was thinking about my little brother being taken, sorry, from South. But it made me so upset that I started getting upset, and I had to put the book down because I couldn't fathom reading it when thinking about my little brother. So how'd y'all's emotions go from the start of the book to the end of the book?
Well, for me, I kind of thought like, it started out, they were just at school with their friends, like everything was normal, and all of a sudden took the dark turn of the being kidnapped, and just like, I know one thing that sort of stuck out for me, it was how they like blindfolded the kid and forced him to shoot his best friend. Like, it went from like a couple pages before they were at school learning, and then go a few more pages and he just killed his best friend. I thought that was like such a turn of events, such a 180-degree difference in like emotion, and I don't know, just and stuff like that. And then at the end he goes to Canada and he gets a better life and stuff like that. But I mean, just to think of how it lives with you, and then just the emotions that you get from reading it, it's just sort of a roller coaster.
I definitely can relate to that, because my emotions kind of followed along with the main character, because when he's there, he's going to school, it's like, oh, this is, cool. He's able to get an education. He's got friends, he's doing his thing. And then it was really interesting to kind of see myself, as soon as he gets kidnapped and he's talking about how scared he was, I could, feel that for him. And it kind of went from, being frightened to being sad to being angry. He talked a lot about how his anger built up inside of him, and I definitely felt that in myself as I was reading, because all I could think of was, this poor kid's childhood was stolen. And so I definitely think it's a very emotionally powerful book.
I think it hit for me like when I read in the back of the book and it had the picture of the real Michael, and like you could see the scar on his face, where in the book it had talked about like him getting cut by the machete. And I think that's like when it hit home for me a little bit, was like, this is an actual person, like there he is, and just imagining all of that.
And he's got to get emotional every time he tells his story, because in his photo you can see that he's trying to keep his emotions in, but at the same time he can't.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So I'll go ahead and do my questions. The first one is talking about from a teacher's point of view. What grade would you guys like teach this in or let kids read this in?
Well, for me, I would have to say fourth or fifth grade, because fifth grade you're learning about other like countries, and you are in fourth grade. But fifth graders are about to go on to middle school, and they're going to learn a whole lot more about human trafficking and child soldiers within middle school.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you said, just because I think you have to have like a level of like maturity to read it and to actually really understand it, of like the boys' emotions. Because I think if you would do it kind of for a younger age, I also think the illustrations are kind of like scary in a way for like younger kids. So I definitely think fifth grade would be a really good target for the book. When explaining about the countries and then leading into the human trafficking.
Yeah, I agree with like the upper elementary, and that's probably what I would do as a teacher. But like, and I took a moment to think about your question. Like, this little boy was 5 when he went through it, so it would not be like an insane thought to read this with a kindergarten class. I don't think I would ever do that, but just to like put those together, like if I read this to a kindergarten class, I would be reading it about an experience that happened to a little boy at their age. Like that, there's a lot of weight to that, but I don't think I would ever do that, but just thinking about it like that kind of brings more, speaks to how deep of a subject it is.
I get what you're saying. I think like in a way, like like you could read it to maybe like kindergarten class, but like present it in like a different way where it's like not as like scary, and like a way like they understand like, hey, like this happened to like a boy like your age. It can happen to anyone like in the United States. So like maybe like presenting it in a way of like just kind of like of like awareness like of your surroundings and stuff like that.
Yeah, I would definitely. I agree with using it in upper grades, especially for the whole awareness aspect of it, because I would want it to be used as a story to bring cultural and social awareness to the students rather than scaring them with it. Because I feel like with younger children, they definitely would be like, whoa, what? But older kids could kind of think back and be like, oh, just a few years ago, this could have been me. Instead of, just being a scary story, it's a socially awakening story, so to speak.
Yeah, it can teach kids about Africa and what goes on over there.
And that leads to my next question, which was, how can we teach this in elementary schools? Like, how can we teach this book to fourth or fifth graders, like subject, or like you're talking about Africa, or talking about how, like this could happen if we if we were there or something like that. Like, how could we teach this?
I mean, I definitely think like how we have talked about like using it with like talking about countries, but I also think maybe you could like tie in like prevention to like human trafficking maybe, and like how like you can stop it, and like are there ways to prevent it, or like what can you do in like the situation of like human trafficking. So I think like maybe those are some ways, along with like the country aspect of it.
So like a social studies thing?
Yeah, for sure.
I think it might be nice to have someone come in and speak to the class as well, like whether it was someone from like a human trafficking prevention type program, or whether it was actually someone who had experienced that. It might be a good chance to get someone in the classroom with a closer perspective on it.
I think that's always good. I know, like when I was in, I think fourth grade, we were talking about like World War II, and we had a World War II veteran come in and talk to us. So yeah, find something like that. I think it'd be great, sort of like a hands-on experience.
I think it would be also kind of how we were talking about earlier, how the refugee situation will be a little bit more applicable when we're teachers. So I feel like it definitely will be able to start a dialogue in a classroom regarding like refugees in America. So I feel like you could teach it that way too, and how this isn't just a story, you may have friends, that you meet that are escaping this kind of horror, but I don't know, I feel like it could be a very good social lesson for the students, and kind of just a very good sit down and discuss it at group time kind of book.
All right, I guess I'll go next. My first question comes from page 19, if you guys want to look there, and it's just describe how Michael felt when he took off his blindfold, and how would you have reacted? I know that's a very loaded question.
Probably just in shock, just being in shock for me. I think like all this has just happened. Like you were just playing with each other, and then all of a sudden, I think that'd be probably my reaction.
Yeah, I think the illustration like kind of does, tying back into illustrations as we have talked about. I think it's like does a really good job like not showing his face like when they see it, because I think it would almost be like too much. So I think like having them like just show his feet kind of like impacts it even more. Just like show like he has died and like they were just playing. So
You could even take that a step further. I interpreted the feet illustration kind of as an embodiment of kind of the shame and the guilt, because a lot of times, whenever you see a character who's feeling guilty or ashamed of what they've done, they kind of look down at their feet. So I kind of took it a step further in that way. I mean, not everyone interprets it that way, obviously, but I kind of just could see through that the pain and the just automatic guilt that he had just murdered his best friend. And I just feel like that was so powerful and such a simple illustration. So I definitely think it's, oh my gosh, I don't even know what I would think.
Yeah, the way the man tells him that they are his family now and his family will never take him back after he had done shot his best friend, it made me think like, what would I do if somebody told me that? And then by the end of the book, he goes back home and his family is still there for him. They don't shut him out. And it doesn't say, but I wonder if he ever spoke of them making him, blindfold him and he shooting his best friend. I don't think him being 5 at this time, I don't think he would talk about it, but once he got older, he probably would talk to his family about it, because they're going to ask him when he gets older what happened when he was kidnapped.
I mean, I definitely think it was a dialogue that was brought up later in his life, because his dad does say, he wrote that his dad said, don't talk about it. Like, don't even talk about it to us.
Yeah, that's actually kind of leads into my next question. I kind of took from that a little bit. So on page 29, I said, why did Michael's father tell him not to talk about his experience? Do you think this was beneficial or damaging? And what would you have done as a parent?
Oh, wow.
Me, I think it would be maybe half and half, because something like that if you don't talk about it, it's going to eat you alive inside, and he might even and he's still alive, but he could have maybe thought about suicide at some point because he never talked about it. So me as a parent, I wouldn't make my child talk about it. Maybe have, when they're ready, come and talk to me about it. But I'm not going to make my child talk about something they don't want to talk about, especially if they went through child soldiering like he did.
I thought it was interesting, like on page 29, it says he also wanted to protect me from myself and from my memories. And like for me, I just feel like he was like almost like making him see his memories more and more, because like he's reliving it through his mind, and so he's like always thinking about it rather than like expressing his feelings, kind of what you were saying, and like not talking about it, because like they tell us like now in today's society like you should like talk about your problems, and like I guess it's like different for their culture, like you should like not talk about your problems is kind of just how I took it. And I don't know, I don't think it was effective. I think like you should share his experience.
I I think it definitely made sense as to why his father would say that. I could definitely see how, from the parents' perspective, how hard it would be to hear your 5-year-old tell you these things, you know? And I almost feel like maybe his father, in a sense, was kind of trying to keep it from altering his view of his son, because I don't see how your child could go through that and you not look at them differently, not necessarily in a bad way, if anything,
Yeah.
look at them with pity and extreme sorrow. But I definitely agree. I don't think it was very effective. I think that may have been part of the cause for him talking about how angry he was. Because if you're never able to talk about something, for some people it works, but going through something like this when you're 5 and kind of just brushing it under the rug and not talking about it, I definitely don't think would have been my course of action as a parent.
I think from the father's point of view, though, he was probably trying his hardest to be able to preserve his son's like childhood. Like 5 years old, you just done all this stuff in like a short amount of time. So that's probably like where the dad's point of view is coming from, about telling him to sort of hold it in and everything. And then the next few pages sort of talks about that, how he tried to get him toys and try to do things to just make it better. But the anger and the not talking about it sort of just stayed with him.
Are we done? I don't know how this is like supposed to end.
There's no, but I can stop recording now since we are finished with it.
Okay.
So.